They were gathered around his chair. It was a wheelchair on about the 5th floor of the Good Samaritan Hospital in Downers Grove, Illinois. The wife, the sister-in-law, the daughter. And he wasn't saying very much. He was far into the stages of dementia where there wasn't a lot of speech. But they were there and they connected with him until one of them noticed that he was speaking. Well, he was making noise at least. And they noticed he was making this noise. Hey guys, I think he's talking. And then one of them figured out, well, you know what? I think he's making a car noise because look at his foot. He was going like this with this foot. People online, it's going like this with this foot. And so one of them leaned in and they said, Jim, that's great. It looks like you're driving the car. You remember how to drive the car. And then she said, brum, brum, good, Jim, go. Brum. At which point he stopped and he looked at her and clear as day, he said, that's not my car. And so you are learning then about my father, Jim Brown. And that happened late in his stages of dementia. And it reminds me as I was getting ready, for this today, to get ready to tell my story and which ancestors I wanted to talk about. But this is what Dia de Muertos is about. It's about telling stories and remembering joyfully when we can. And I don't want to discount that keep coming, there we go. I don't know if we're on it's on auto forward, so whatever we can do to fix that. So we're here to tell stories. And I do want to honor that sometimes, like with Mother's Day, Father's Day, and some of those holidays, all of the memories may not be so positive about some of our family members. And there's room for that too. But today I get to remember my dad really joyfully. His sense of humor is probably that, and my ability in music, I think, are the two things I get the most from him. So thanks, Dad. And you can be doing that throughout this service today, remembering who it is that you want to remember and the stories that you want to tell. Telling these stories because their story became our story continues on into the future. And on our ofrenda up here, we have Charles and Myrtle Fillmore, the parents of unity, if you will. We all owe a debt to these people, don't we? We're here because of them. You're here because of your parents. And how important and beautiful and sacred, and I get teary-eyed thinking about all that it took to bring us here. When you think about billions and billions of people that it took for all of us to be here, to be in this moment right now. Charles and Myrtle and your parents and the ones before them who had no idea. My dad had no idea that his daughter was going to be up here in San Francisco talking to you on Dia de Muertos. So why am I up here talking to you about Dia de Muertos? Well, let me ask you a question. How many of you have this practice already in your life? Has this been an important holiday that you have celebrated? I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, about 10, 11 hands. 11 hands. And online, I wonder how many people this has been a practice. David, you mentioned part of your heritage wasn't part of your practice. So I'll be honest with you, this has never been in my life. So why the heck am I up here talking to you? Well, Reverend Ken wanted the day off today. He was tired of writing sermons, so I'll have you take that up with him later. Why her? Yes. And I happened to be in town, and it happened to be this holiday. But you may have actually noticed when the slide went up with my name on it, that my name is Elizabeth Mora. That's right, I'm married Mexican. So I am now fully equipped to stand up here clearly and tell you everything that you need to know about this Mexican holiday. So where did I go for my research? I started and I went over to my husband, and I'm going to show you a picture of his mom. So this is Enadina Mora. this delightful soul who moved on a few years ago. And this was us on Mexican Independence Day, celebrating down in Aguascalientes. Now, you all probably have celebrated Mexican Independence Day, right? No. Anybody know when Mexican Independence Day is? Cinco de Mayo. But not. She is cringing over here. She is cringing. We thought that. Yeah, newsflash. I'm going to educate you on a few things today, and one of them is that we Americans thought that Cinco de Mayo was the Mexican Independence Day, but it's not. It's in September. I know, because I was there, and there was a big parade, and we got really drunk and silly that day. And we will learn a few things the same way about what this holiday means. Cinco de Mayo is actually a celebration of just a small battle. And isn't it fun that these holidays can bring up some of the cultural issues that we can learn about? So Enedina Mora is my mother-in-law, and I'm married to Arturo. So my research started with Arturo. Please, tell me everything that you want me to tell them about Día de Muertos. I got nothing, babe. Wait. You are an American of Mexican heritage. Note, that's how he likes to be referred to as. An American born here of Mexican heritage. His 5 brothers and sisters born in Mexico, and the gringos were all born in America. So I said, okay, well, at least how was it celebrated back in your hometown? How did your mom do that? She didn't do anything with it. Okay, so tell me what your understanding is of this. He's like, I don't really know. This is just not a thing. So it wasn't a thing for him growing up. It wasn't a thing for the family down in Mexico, in the city that they lived in. Okay, but you grew up in Little Village in Chicago. Surely there was a parade or a museum. Honey, there was nothing. Interesting. There really wasn't anything happening about it. Yet here we are today celebrating it and moved by this ofrenda that's up here. And it's changed. It's changed over time. And what I discovered was it's complicated. It's complicated. Like a lot of things in life. Like the Mexican history, it's complicated. So I said, well, tell me about family, honey. We were down in Mexico a number of times, and every time we went and visited Dad's grave. And when I went to visit my grandmother in Dike, Iowa, we did the same thing. We would always go to my grandfather's grave. So we had that in common. And I said, well, do you think that family's more important to you than it is maybe to the families that we see around us, in my family, for instance? And he paused, and he thought about it, and he said, yes, I do think that it's a little bit more important for people of Mexican descent. Maybe that's being immigrants into this country. Now, I know lots of close Italian families, a lot of close Irish families, your families, whatever your cultural, may also be close. It's not to say that they have the monopoly on that, but it was important, and it is important to them, and they are particularly close. And yet, they have their Bruno, and we don't talk about him, no, either. There's a Bruno in every family, perhaps. So how did we get here with this holiday that my husband didn't have much to do with, that David didn't have much to do with, that Eva perhaps did have something to do with? So the complication and the beauty of it partially comes from our border, that we are close, that we have cross-pollinated. So how did it start? Well, traditionally, when you do your scholarly research, which begins, of course, with the scholar Wikipedia, and all the blurbs that you may read, well, it's a 3,000-year-old holiday based on the Aztec tradition, pre-Columbian, in the region that we now know as Mexico. Except maybe it isn't. Well, it's based on the indigenous population of that area. Except maybe it isn't. It might actually be more from the European population. Well, it was based on local tradition, except it might actually be more Catholic than anything else. It is complicated and hard to define. And some of the scholars that I read past Wikipedia, thank you very much, I don't stop there, but past Wikipedia, the scholars disagree that this is really coming from this 3,000-year-old Aztec tradition, or it is more based on the Spanish conquerors that came over and brought the Catholic religion into this land. And clearly we can see it's a bit of both no matter what. It's also a holiday that is primarily celebrated in a private way with your family and a friend at home. Or is it more of a public celebration with parades celebrated at heritage centers? It's both. So it's hard for me to even stand up here and tell you this is exactly what it is, because the minute those words come out, it's changed. That's one thing we do know about this holiday, is that it has melded and morphed and changed, and it is changing right now in the way that we are living it. You are actually creating this holiday as it moves forward. What's especially cool is that in this case, we aren't really guilty, I believe, of cultural appropriation, which is a real concern when I dip into anything like this in another culture. Am I appropriating? Yet in this holiday, most of the writers that I read said, come one, come all. We love it when you set up an ofrenda. We love it when you know about this holiday. And yet, we're going to do just one better by understanding what was really going on when this holiday became popular. Because there's more to it than just the religious side of it. There's more to it than just what the Spanish brought over. This became a truly local holiday back around the Mexican Revolution. Oh my God, it's time for history. Here we go. A little bit of history, though. So about 2 million people were killed in the Mexican Revolution. They finally, after being conquered and after being ruled by outsiders, had their freedom. And so they were able to speak more freely, and then the satirists came along. And they said, well, now we can really comment on what's happening because this is our land. This is truly now our land. And so commentary came up. Octavio Paz said, the Mexican is familiar with death, jokes about it, caresses it, sleeps with it, celebrates it. It's one of their most favorite toys and most steadfast love. There is a unique relationship with death among much of the Mexican people. And at the same time, we came up with Katrina. Around the same time, you remember, you've probably seen this image. We don't have one up here today. But guess what this is? Oh, this looks like a fun caricature. But this is actually social commentary that you're looking at. Again, it's complicated. It's complex. There's more going on here. This was commentary on the European influence, and that the ladies of Mexico were trying to dress like the Europeans and the silliness of that. So they were poking fun a little bit, and they were saying, in the end, we all go to the same place. In the end, you may have your fancy hat, and I may be a simple person, and we're both going to die, and we're both going to the same place. And the story ends the same way, no matter what. It was also a commentary on income inequality. It was a commentary. Diego Rivera also helped popularize this by putting Katrina in one of his murals. So they were writing about it, they were drawing about it, they were commenting on it, and they were finding and changing and growing in their national identity. They were recognizing the ancestry that came behind them while they were creating their future. It really is this beautiful bridge, isn't it? Of remembering where we've come from in this now moment in preparation for where we're going, no matter what nationality we are. And it's a time to stop and make that reflection, which is such a gift that you have in this church, to be given this opportunity, myself included. I don't have an ofrenda at home, but I think next year we will. It was an opportunity for me to stop and to think about it. And to discover then, how did this leap to be something that was just celebrated regionally, scattered in different cities, to sort of this nationwide, they get the day off. That's how you know it's legit. They get the day off from school in Mexico. Well, after the Mexican Revolution, which started to help popularize it, then we had this flood of immigration into the United States. And as this population, the Chicano population in the 70s, wanted to become more known, they became more public. So there were displays, there were AIDS displays, there were social commentary, and so it became more public. This is part of our identity, and here we are. And so it became celebrated more. It came out of the household and onto the public street a little bit more. And then it went back into Mexico and changed how it's celebrated there. And do you know what that's called? You're not going to believe it. The pizza effect. So we have the pizza effect to thank for the fact that we're celebrating this day. Stay with me for a second. So it's like in Italy where they had this pizza, but then it went abroad and people put pepperoni and sausage on it, and it came back into Italy and it was changed. It's called the pizza effect. So we actually changed. The immigrants who came here helped expand and evolve this holiday. So thanks to the pizza effect. But then there was one more biggie. You're not going to believe this. There was one man who had a big part to play in around the year 2005 or 2015? I think it's 2005. You'll check me on that. Anyway, Bond, James Bond. Right? Anybody know why? Like what? Okay, I got one head nod here. So you're going to go home tonight and on Netflix, you're going to rent the movie Spectre. Because in Spectre, down Mexico City's main drag is a huge parade that never happened. Never part of what they celebrated there until Mr. James Bond came. So the next year they said, that was so fun, let's do that again. And 250,000 people showed up. And they've been doing it ever since. Tradition. So what a melding, what an interesting holiday that we're celebrating. It's American, it's Mexican, it's Spanish, it's all sorts of things wrapped into one. And today, this is how we celebrate it, with these altars, by taking time to get educated about the Hispanic, Latino, Latina populations, their situations. We have a situation at the border. It's still complicated. And this holiday, in a way, brings us together. And maybe we can all take it into our hearts wherever we are to become more informed about what the Mexican-American experience is like. And I was lucky enough to go down to Mexico a number of times to visit my mother-in-law, to get off the resort in Cancun and to get into daily life in Aguascalientes, and what a joy that was and what the challenges were. But here's what I noticed most of all, and my husband says this about every time he would go down, spend the summer on the ranch, is in general how happy the people are there. Incredibly happy. His cousins didn't have shoes when they ran around and they played, and they made fun of his Spanish. Greedy, greedy, greedy is what they said he sounded like. Greedy, greedy, greedy. And they played with whatever they could find, and they were happy. And his family that moved up here, that emigrated up here, glad that they did, And they carried so many traditions, and now I think Arturo and I get to carry forward this tradition. And then when I back it all up and think a little bit bigger about what this situation looks like, what this holiday rather looks like to me, of course I put a unity spin on it, and I say, what essentially does it mean to me internally? I know about it so that I'm not appropriating. I'm educated. I'm moved by it. I'm curious. As I heard you sing, my tears just came into my eyes with your beautiful voice, and looking at all the pictures of all the people that you love, so moving. That's something I want in my life. I want to do that once a year, so thank you, Reverend Ken. And then what I most want to do is live from it. This is what it is ultimately about, isn't it? To reflect on death is to decide, how then shall I live? The stories that come out here. I want to be more like my dad saying vroom, vroom, and being silly. I want that. I want to be a little more like this guy. Recognize him? Reverend Ken in his Dorothy Hamill phase. And this was Ken, Reverend Ken, making the biggest pile of jambalaya that I have ever seen in my life to feed like 30 of us in seminary. And so for Dia de Muertos, you don't have to be gone for me to say how much I love you and how much you've changed my life and how grateful I am for you. And so you can go do that with anybody in your life. You can say, I want to let you know now how important you are. And I recognize what it took to get me here to my ancestors. Now, I did not have the benefit of having children in this life. It just wasn't mine. It was actually a choice. Don't cry. It's okay. I chose not to have any physical children. I chose to put all my love and energy into the Romas and the Joshuas and the nieces and the nephews in my life. And I'm grateful for that. And yet, as I look at a day like today where you consider the legacy that you will leave behind, perhaps I did mine in a slightly different way, by being a singer and a performer and, I guess, a minister. But one of the songs that was my go-to song in my repertoire years ago when I could play the role came from a musical called Baby. The story goes on, because the story does go on. Everything that it took to get us here in this amazing moment to sit here with all of you and the people online. Gratitude. My favorite 12 power is life. Any practice that I do with the powers, I always start with life, because without it, there ain't anything else. So life is key for me. The power of life to continue on. And the story that I will tell, the stories that you tell. There may not be children for me, there may not be for you, but every one of us has a story that goes on. And all these things I feel and more, my mother felt, and hers before, a chain of life begun upon the shore of some dark sea has reached to me, and now I can feel the chain extending. My child is next in a line that has no ending, and here am I feeling life that her child will feel when I'm long gone. Yes, all that was is part of me, as I am part of what's to be, and thus it is our story goes on and on and on and on and on and on.